Most people want to belong to their peer group. They want to be the same as everyone else when it comes to opinions. In fact, they judge their own personal sanity by bouncing ideas off their neighbors and friends who will answer back and agree on these same topics in kind. It doesn't matter if the topics or what you're given are facts or utter nonsense, as long as everyone agrees at the same time. You'll say, well, I'm sane, and your friends will all agree because they've had the same information given to them. We don't only get the same information given to us, we're led through sequences, even documentaries, to leave you with a predetermined fixed conclusion on any given topic. Most folk are, once again, unaware of this. They think, I've just been given all the facts on this topic, and this is the obvious conclusion, which is always given to you by the final experts on the particular program. There's no thinking involved. We tie this in with the Brzezinski. Brzezinski said in 2 Ages, now this guy was way up with the NSA. He's a master geopolitician. He admits he works in 20, 50-year periods to do with geopolitics in other countries. But he said himself, the public will shortly be unable to think or reason for themselves. He says he was meaning by the form of information that was given to them, the type, the formulas that were in use then in the 1970s. And eventually, he said, they will expect the media to do all their thinking and reasoning for them.
If we do any or all of the above, we blow our chances of flattening this curve. You probably put yourself or your family members personally at risk, and I can promise you we put our health system at risk.
It's me, Jack Black. It's time to flatten the curve.
And it's working. It is flattening the curve.
It's because of this virus that we have to take these extraordinary measures, and my job is to try to flatten the curve.
That's why people today can't think outside of the programming from television.
The worst irony that could come about from these demonstrations is that they forced us to stay in this posture longer than we're already planning to.
As COVID-19 has taken over our lives now, some are concerned less by the virus and are more concerned with the removal of our rights and draconian measures being put into place. Where some interpret Governor Whitmer as encouraging them to help keep others safe, others see her having hinted at the practicing of our inalienable rights enshrined in the Constitution as somehow delaying our going back to life as usual. It turns neighbor against neighbor. The subtext here is that if you protest, you delay everyone's recovery and therefore you should be ostracized as a bad person.
Currently right now, outside of Queen's Park, where you're located, there is a protest with about 100 folks who are calling for the end of the lockdown here in this province and across this country. What message do you have to people who are not taking this seriously, but also who could be not adhering to social and physical distancing protocols?
Well, that's a great question. You know, when I looked out the window and we see these people that are absolutely irresponsible. It's reckless to do what they're doing. And personally, I think it's selfish. We have, a bunch of yahoos out in the front of Queen's Park sitting there protesting that the place isn't open.
That is Ontario Premier Doug Ford calling protesters selfish, a bunch of yahoos. Many citizens who are malleable to this form of programming will turn against those standing up for their rights, compliantly endorsing and accepting the government's removal of said rights. If you remove the talk of governments saying that they actually care for you, if you remove the virus from this equation, the guise of it, this would not be accepted under any other circumstances outside of acts of war. However, because the populace has been convinced that the threat of death is more important than their daily lives and rights.
Think about the potential effects of passing something on, whether it's this virus, COVID-19 virus, or another one. It's not worth the risk.
Individuals are actually feeling they are being patriotic by forfeiting said rights and turning on those neighbors who stand up for them.
On the streets of Harrisburg, some protesters say they need relief now.
As a small business owner, I want to stand up for my employees and our way of life to be able to earn a living.
Aaron Riddle says the governor's order has forced him to lay off 30 of his employees.
He's closed construction business. He's one of 5 states that deem construction non-essential, non-life sustaining, so I had to lay off my employees. We have no work.
We're exercising our First Amendment by saying that we think this is unfair and Americans need to get back to work.
This is not an issue limited to protesting. Just walking down the street or in a park might get you on your state governor's next COVID briefing to the press, demagoguing those who don't trust them, who don't buy the idea that daily life is akin to drunk driving, who value their freedoms over promises of safety.
Frankly, there has been a laxness on social distancing, especially over this past weekend, that is just wholly unacceptable.
This is what they do with citizens in China, just so you know. You can easily make your local news by jaywalking or running a red light, publicly shamed by the unquestioned powers that be. In context, what Governor Cuomo is calling out is people walking in a park.
The cinema names and shames people considered untrustworthy, plastering their details, even their addresses, across big screens.
Has everyone forgotten how untrustworthy these politicians are? It appears we have. Overnight, we suddenly placed aside all we know of them and receive our programming, a potent hypnosis telling each of us how to think. If you dissent, if you do not groupthink, you become society's pariah. Is that your country? Is that the country you want to live in? What assurance do you have that they're ever going to give you back the rights that you so willingly gave away?
The working class people did not have credit cards. You could not get a credit card. You couldn't get a bank loan without collateral to put something up against it. So therefore you were at pretty well a fixed income. There was no extra cash outside of rent, food and so on, clothes for the children, essentials. There was no extras for luxuries. There was no credit given to them. Yet the British government, just like the Chinese government did 2 years ago, made it a mandate that every household in Britain must get a television set.
Your information about COVID-19 is highly controlled. Your news outlets are definitely pushing an agenda. But even here on YouTube, if you go searching for information about the coronavirus, all you're actually going to find are official news sources. You have to do some real digging to find dissent. This is highlighted by the removal of a recent ABC broadcast of Drs. Daniel Erickson and Artin Masihi in California. They recently offered their findings regarding the pandemic, findings which were controversial because they contradict the official narrative. After receiving some 5 million views and having gone viral, the video was removed by YouTube for violating their guidelines. Following a television broadcast with the two, which suddenly brought those who depend on that light box in their living room for the truth, running onto the internet to find it. Mirrors of the video have been removed. Doctors' groups have been marched out to condemn the men. And yet if anyone has watched the video, these men come off as credible, informed, and concerned for our true public safety. You can always find someone who disagrees with you to bring onto the news and discredit someone, even a group of them. That doesn't mean they are right. This is why we have discussions and debates, supposedly, in this country. Censorship merely stifles the truth. And it should tell you something when discussions about something interfering so blatantly with the world's lives cannot be discussed if it doesn't follow a particular script.
But when you start changing and making it law, that certain words can no longer be used, even in ordinary conversation. After all, we speak because we communicate. When you can end communication, then you're into George Orwell's 1984, where the dictionary gets thinner and thinner and thinner, and there's newspeak, you see, the new terminology to use, which conveys only what the elite want it to convey.
The American State Department, in the most unprecedented move I have seen ever, level 4 for travel advisory. That means an era, do not travel. It covers the entire world. This level 4 is usually reserved for countries within a state of war. Think of Yemen or Somalia.
Every press conference, every news broadcast uses the vocabulary of must, do, comply, stay. No discussion. If you dare to question this, or to ask the question as to whether or not this is all ridiculous, you will promptly be put in your place, or, as happened with Dr. Erickson and his colleague, censored and condemned altogether. We won't even have the discussion.
And you can't eventually have words. There's words missing that you need to use to explain actual reality. It's gone. And as the dictionary gets thinner and thinner too, and it's full of newspeak, it's impossible for anyone to foment revolution, because no one will be able to understand the other person. The words are gone to express it. You can't express anything that matters. Isn't that interesting, eh? It's no coincidence. No coincidence that you have these new censor departments on what you say. Because what you say, remember, is only a reflection of what you think. Thought crime. Thought crime. And now you have speech crime. And so on, and so on, and so on.
All right, we got such a huge reaction to the two docs we had on at the top of the show, Dan Erickson and Artan Masihi. Well, YouTube just took down their viral video challenging the COVID narrative when it comes to, what's happening in California especially. Ironically, this is exactly what they warned about, that this isn't about science, this is about control. And in this case, control of a narrative. We should have seen it coming. YouTube CEO was on CNN 8 days ago saying, quote, anything that would go against World Health Organization recommendations would be a violation of our policy. Removal is another really important part of our policy. Well, if you aren't worried about censorship in this country, you better be now. It's not the government doing it, but something that controls so much of the dialogue is fairly close to the kind of censorship I never thought we'd see in this country. That is truly terrifying.
I would definitely disagree with Ingram that it is not the government, as these days there's no distinction. Why would YouTube want to censor the content without pressure from outside? And from whom? There's a global agenda afoot. It says Novus Ordo Seclorum on the back of your dollar bill. Check it out. I'm not promoting Laura Ingraham. I'm not promoting Fox News. I'm not a fan of either, and I'm not a fan of mainstream news in general. I am grateful that they had the men on, though it will make it easily dismissed by those who have been trained to view life along party lines as being now a partisan issue. These men are partisan hacks, rather than doctors, scientists. It's not partisan. COVID-19 is not something we need the left versus right paradigm present in. But it is no less because decades of brainwashing and foolish trust vested in the government by the American people has been built up in the minds of far too many.
Now, since when is government interested in how happy you are at home? There's another reason for this. And sure enough, the working classes all got these DER. DER was the company that brought them all into Britain. And the guys came around every weekend collecting their half-crown, 5 shillings. And suddenly this, and I can remember where I was, it was one of the last areas really to get television, a real working class area. I can remember this high being taken by my parents to the local park on a weekend and passing dozens and dozens and dozens of other couples on the way with their toddlers as well. When he got to the park, which was a valley, there were over maybe 1,000, 1,500 couples along the grass in the valley. And that's where everything was discussed. Local politics, national politics, labor unions to do with their mining and so on. And everyone mingled with everyone else, old school friends and so on. That system had been going on for hundreds of years, where people communicated thoughts, real feelings, real things that really mattered to them and their communities, to each other, conversation. When the TV came in, and I was still about this high, within about a month, I could go down that park every weekend and no one, I mean no one was there.